Silver String Park to me was like, when I was growing up, was like a sanctuary. Because this is where everybody came to come together. And in the park, we, the black people, didn't have everywhere to go.
One of the only parks in Springfield, for as long as I can remember, that blacks were really able to come to and not be accosted or have, a lot of problems going to. You could go to the other parks in town, but a lot of time racial tension would surface and you just weren't welcome.
And so this was the place that we came. People fall in love here, people fall out of love here. People, it was just a place where it was almost like a little city.
I like to think about Park Day in the action of maybe the evolution of Park Day, because going back, I've had the privilege to have history keepers, which are our elders, that have shared their experience with Park Day. And then also I'm going back and I'm thinking about those earlier years before we had Silver Springs Park as the designated park for the African American community. So I'm thinking about Jonathan Fairbanks.
Jonathan Fairbanks was born on January 7th of 1828 in New England. His father had a lucrative lumber business until a tariff change bankrupted the business and the family. The family went from one of wealth to one of poverty, where they worked on a farm doing labor until Jonathan was 19 years old. It was at that time that Jonathan decided that he wanted to make life better for himself, and he was going to do so through education. And he wanted to become a teacher, and he accepted a proposal to move to Ohio, where he was a teacher, and then ultimately a school superintendent. In 1866, he decided that he wanted to change his vocation.
When he came here, he did not teach school. He went into the sawmill lumber business from an invitation to come here. He was very successful.
That was until an economic crisis of 1873. Fairbanks, who had amassed quite a bit of land, over 110 acres here in Springfield, ended up having to liquidate his assets. Fairbanks and his family fell into economic hardships. In 1874, he and his family decided to move back to Ohio. It was at that time that the president of the Springfield School Board invited him to stay in Springfield if he would accept the superintendent job for the Springfield schools.
He was a superintendent here for 38 years. When he came to Springfield, there were no public schools. He came in 1866. This first Springfield school started in 1867, but it was only for white children. There were no black schools until after the Civil War. The Freedmen's Association came into being, and they started providing black people with food, shelter, and learning and clothing. And the first schools for black children were in little frame houses or church basements. Mr. Fairbanks would come to the Lincoln School on North Washington, which was the original Lincoln School. And he would come all the time as a visitor to observe the black children in their studies. He would watch them do arithmetic, watch them spell, read, and he made the comment that a black child can learn as well as a white child if they are given the opportunity. And that's how I came to know about Mr. Fairbanks. His importance to us, and the fact that he thought that we could do as well as white people, when all our life we'd been told, no, you ignorant, you can't learn. You too stupid to learn. It was even told black people would never fly because they're too dumb to learn how to fly. And look at all the things that black people are doing now that they never did before. And it just keeps on growing and growing and growing.
And so he's walking in classrooms. Then it evolves where you're in 1906, the lynching.
Fairbanks wrote on his journal on April 15th, 1906, "It was one of the most brutal events I have ever known."
And he harbors black families in his home. And he's a very respected man in Springfield. And he finds no backlash in that. But yet, the African American community remember him and they honor him.
Mr. Fairbanks was a great benefactor to the black race.
Silver Springs Park is the 7th historical park that was founded in Springfield, and that was in 1918. And that was done because these 13.5 acres that belonged to Jonathan Fairbanks.
Before that, I guess it was a cow pasture. You know, it was just acreage out here south of or north of his house. His house was up on the corner of Sherman and Central.
That's the significance of Mr. Fairbanks and Silver Springs Park. Silver Springs Park was the designated park for black people here in Springfield. That was the only park we could go to for many, many years. And we also named the park, which was named after the spring water in Silver Springs Park.
So it's got significance to me, you know, being someplace where we all could gather, you know, play and do whatever we did.
Silver Springs has a lot of history for the black community in that it has brought a lot of people together. This whole part of town along the railroad tracks had a lot of property. A lot of black folks lived right next to the tracks, in fact. So this whole area supported, you know, a large amount of black folks. Like I say, the spring is probably the big attraction here. Historically, the spring was probably the reason people came to this area. You know, it was a natural spot. Drinking water out of the spring, that water that most kids who grew up here remembers putting their face in and taking a cold drink out of, that water was precious to us. I remember my great-grandmother talked about coming here and being baptized in that same spring.
Would hunt for greens, to go cook greens on the hillside, and they would have a fork, and they would be picking up these dandelions, you know, and having a meal there.
I remember taking watercress out of there and bringing it back.
When I see some of the old photos from the family albums, and I see us in the park, you know, at 2 years old, at 3 years old, like it seemed that that being in the park, especially on a Sunday afternoon, that was just a time that I can remember because so many families, African American families in Springfield, you showed up at the park on a Sunday afternoon and everybody was dressed and it was just a really fun time.
It was a community. And one thing too about the park is we had churches, so we were surrounded by churches. And in the park, across the bridge, there was a bench. And I call it the prayer bench.
You got to see people because you didn't always see people, you know, everywhere. I mean, if you didn't go to church with them or if you didn't live in the same neighborhood, because we were in so many different neighborhoods in Springfield.
It was a place to come to fellowship, a place to come to commune together. I call it the gathering.
And playing out here, croquet, playing in the Jordan Creek.
They called it the Jordan. They didn't call it the Jordan. They would jump the Jordan, and go to work. But one thing, every Saturday morning, we come down here and fish for crawdads. And the whole bank would be full of kids. And you just had a little string. We would, you know, a little gizzard from the chicken or whatever. And we would come down here and fish for crawdads on the string. We pulled them out. We didn't worry about the snakes or nothing, I guess, but we would catch a big old thing of crawdads on Saturday mornings. At my growing up, there was no white people in the park. It was all black because that's the only place that we could go. And so, praise God. And you know, the swimming pool used to be filled up with a spring house. There was a spring house in the park, you know, where the spring is going out right now, there was a spring house they used to talk about. It was a boxing thing on top of it. But that's how they filled the pool up, from that spring house. And it took about 2 weeks, but it filled up that pool. This place was a place of life. They had so much activities for these young people. You know, they had tetherball, they had baseball teams come in and they would play.
A lot of history because, you know, some of our black ball teams, the Giants played here, Foremost ball team played here, and you know, Sunday, the weekends, Saturdays, Sundays mostly, but you know, they would have big ball games down here in the park every Sunday, and Saturdays they would practice, but a lot of people would come down for the ball games just to watch the players play. And so that was a big thing back in the day.
Beautiful, wonderful players, some going on to be a part of the Negro League in Kansas City.
And of course, horseshoes were always being played down here. You know, during that time, the old men loved them horseshoes.
I seen love and compassion and people helping people. You know, one thing about people go out their way and help you. And the park was a place where kids can come down here and know they're going to be safe. And you didn't have to worry about anything. And they knew if they got in trouble, people had the permission to spank them and send them home.
The kids, as far as I was concerned, at a young age, had to mind our manners because, you know, that was when the older folks would tell you something and you had to comply. Because if they told your parents, you were in trouble with them, and you were in trouble once you got home to your parents too.
There was always a watchful eye. There was always a tribal mentality in this park.
It's always people from, you know, they come from everywhere, people that you grew up with and everything, and my children's friends and my relatives and everybody.
The first inkling from one of our history keepers, Miss Alma Clay, she's 98 years old, and she said, it didn't matter what day August 4th fell on, that was Freedom Day.
Well, it started as the 4th of August celebration, and then it turned into Park Day.
That's what they celebrated since she was a little girl. I'm thinking 1940s, and earlier with her parents being alive, you know, that this was their first Emancipation Day. And then I go back further and I'm thinking about William Wilberforce and how he spends his whole life to abolish the slave trade. In 1807, he becomes a part of the House of Commons when he was just 21 years old. And he has this in his heart that the slave trade is wrong, and it takes him 20 years. He was actually on his deathbed when word came to him that they finally abolished slavery. 800,000 folks were freed.
The connection when it comes to Park Day being celebrated in early August, it comes from the English emancipation of enslavement, August 1st of 1834. People in the Americas, and that had been a part of the British Empire, had actually celebrated that as an Emancipation Day. The irony, if you will, is that in Missouri, people would celebrate and look at emancipation as being deferred. So when the United States had signed the Declaration of Independence in July 4th, 1776, that freedom did not come for many people of African descent. In places like Missouri, the celebration was around the 1st of August. And connecting that to August 4th made more sense. So it's August 4th as opposed to July 4th. Now that doesn't mean that individuals are not able to or don't celebrate both. Individuals absolutely do. But the August 4th really has a day of importance and significance, a day of reunion, a day of emancipation, a day of freedom. And it's more than really just a day. It connects people in Springfield of African American heritage to their past. A day of jubilee, if you will. And so it connects families, it connects community, it's about community building, it's about a shared sense of purpose, a collective identity, if you will. And it's rooted in that celebration, in that recognition of freedom that was so difficult to obtain by so many individuals. And so it plays a very, very important role with Silver Springs Park. It is connected to the community. It is connected throughout Missouri. That is something that is so special about the Springfield community, is that there is a connection to its heritage, to its past, and its national past. I mean, and holding individuals accountable, and saying, you know what, we were not a part of that first wave of independence in 1776, but we sure as heck is going to be a part of this next wave of independence, and we are going to recognize our community. We're going to be connected to our past and to our ancestors, and if that meant creating a unique special day in August, then yes, we are going to do that.
Park Day was something that was spectacular. It was like 4th of July.
And I hadn't really seen anything quite like it. We would spend the night in the park. We had booths and food and just fun and camaraderie with friends. So I thought, man, this is just heaven.
There were so many people here. This park was loaded from ear to ear. There were so many people. There was no place to park. Cars galore everywhere.
And many of them traveling from all over the country, coming back home to Springfield, coming back to their roots. Parents and grandparents were bringing children and grandchildren that may not have ever experienced Springfield.
And of course, the Juneteenth idea and the liberation and celebration of freedom.
My earliest memory was a very young child, probably 7, 8 years old. We came down and had fun with our cousins, the other family. You got to see all of these people and associate. And then we'd come down into the park and continue our celebrations. And that would go on to 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning.
It was like the end all be all. I could stay up past 1 o'clock in the morning when I was 14 years old and not get asked where I was. They said, well, he's down in the park, he's okay. So I grew up with that.
And I lived 2 blocks away on Frisco Avenue, and I would go home, take a nap, change my clothes, and being able to come back down here and just have a good time with all of my family and friends.
When I was 14 years old, and my father said, now don't you go down to the park after night. And it was ParkDay weekend, and I said, okay, I'm gonna go to my cousin's. And it was his birthday, and we had family coming in. And so when I snuck to ParkDay with some of my cousins, we heard this music playing, and the DJ was Juan Alexander. And someone said, there's this old man down there really jamming, he's really getting it. And we ran down there, and it was my dad. And I was like, oh no! And he grabbed me in, and we started dancing. So that was one of my favorite memories of ParkDay.
I enjoyed the reception more than anything. The first night when everybody finally gets there and they just, oh man, where you been? You know, that is the most important part to me.
My first night in Springfield when I moved here from Indianapolis, the very first thing I did when I got here was I came to the hospitality night at ParkDay.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was a big event. It was a lot of vendors, a lot of stuff going on. It was a really good time.
And through the years, we have done all kinds of wonderful things with this gathering, skating parties and all kinds of wonderful things for the kids.
Everything was free. The festivities, churches had stands in the park where they sold food on Sundays. So it really was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday type of event. And I can remember being on the cusp of that because I wasn't here when everything began, but I was here young enough at age 18 where I felt part of that, and people were still alive then that gave me that sense of community and that sense of belonging, and I'll never forget it. And they looked for me, even though I wasn't a family member, they looked for me every year and would go and get me.
I am the daughter of Ora Logan, who was one of the founders of ParkDay Weekend. And I think especially for Mom, by 1973, all of her family that had lived in Springfield were all gone. And I think that she wanted to recreate and strengthen family and to bring that joy to other families. And so in preparation for Park Day, that was all year long for her. And so she would be calling people from all over the country. She had all these numbers, there's pre-email. So she had all the phone numbers and she had addresses, and she'd be writing letters. She would make sure everybody had the information well ahead of time, and she'd kind of pump it, like, we're expecting everybody to come. At first we had the St. Louis Club, which originally started it, and then the Kansas City Club was formed, and they joined in with us, and the Springfield Club was formed. So then the three clubs joined in together, working out the weekend. We saw it beginning to grow pretty early on, and I think within just a few short years, there were at least 2,000 people who would be participating in Park Day, and many of them traveling from all over the country, coming back home to Springfield, coming back to their roots.
All the people come together from Kansas City, St. Louis, and California. They all come together and just have a great family time, because it's like a family reunion.
And then, there was a period of time when people started having class reunions at that same time, family reunions, because, like I said, my mother was always pumping what do you call it? She was priming it, You could have your family reunion. You could do your class reunion.
And so it's been a while since we've all been together, and some of us don't even know one another. We've all moved to different places of the nation. And so we wanted to use Park Day, and they allowed us to have a table so that we can reconnect with the local Price family, branches, so that we can form a family reunion in the near future.
It means home, it means heritage, it's my roots. My grandparents were here, my mom, I'm here, my kids have been here, all of my family and friends. I grew up a couple of blocks over, my church is a couple of blocks the other way, the other direction. So it just means it's a base. Whenever the first weekend in August comes around, I know that I'm going to see my family. Somebody's going to have a reunion, and we're going to be meeting up here in Silver Springs Park.
I think my favorite part of Park Day Reunion was the baby beauty contest. You had structure, you had to wear your outfit. A lot of times you couldn't wear no two-piece, you had to wear the one-piece. Usually they had a little band, and they had a fashion show. They would have a fashion show beforehand, and they would have, then they had the muscle man. They would give a trophy to the strongest guys,
Beauty contest, that's, historic for the park. And that went back way before the beginning of the Park Day that as we know it now.
Oh yes, we used to get outfits every weekend. I was in the bathing beauty contest. My sister, my aunts, my cousins, So it's been a major part of my life.
My oldest daughter won all three categories in the pageant, the Big Miss, Little Miss, and Junior Miss, and my youngest won the Little Miss contest. So it was a joy being involved in that, the entertainment, the Pikes putting it on. It was just a joy. And for my kids to be involved in something like that, it brought them out as individuals, because being on, on that kind of a stage and being out there by yourself, you get a little bit more secure in yourself. And I saw them mature by being in the pageant and competing. So, that was great for me to see and be a part of and be involved in.
The churches, they built their concession stands, and they start building them concession stands like 4th of July. And they stayed up until August the 4th.
But they would have their own food, their own booth, their own tent. So the community was, I think, more represented as a whole. So it wasn't just the park committee putting it on, it was like the atmosphere around it was built up from all the other groups of people who participated.
And then it had them string lights, the park would have string lights all over it.
And the churches sold food and candies and
their specialties, the pies and cakes.
The Saturday afternoon, everybody would come together and bring different dishes.
There was a lot of cooking going on.
The food, the rolls, the fried chicken, oh man, the soul food, it was just awesome. It was off the hook. And you could smell it everywhere for 2 or 3 blocks away.
I mean, it's a big deal. Generations of family get together every year. It's kind of like one big family reunion.
And they would barbecue a lot, pigs. Sometimes they dig a pit and put a pig in it, and they would cook that pig.
Glenn Johnson smoking at his house on Sherman Street. This area had a lot of houses down in it, real close to the park. So families would gather at those individual houses and just be a part of the celebration. So it was just a real close-knit, just friendly atmosphere.
I remember them big iron tubs, big old iron tubs, these huge iron tubs, and they had a cloth over top of it, so they had to keep putting ice on it, to keep the pop and stuff cold.
They would figure out the menu for the meat, and it's kind of basic. You gotta have chicken, you gotta have ribs. But and then just pull that all together and try to prepare enough so that whoever comes can have a meal.
But the food, the entertainment, baseball, horseshoes, croquet, all the games, tennis, basketball, we did it all.
That's the only thing I say that I had fun. I had fun.
Well, not as many people as I'm used to seeing. I realize that, people are getting older and, a lot of them are not here anymore and some of them are, ill and can't be here. But I miss the crowd, more than anything.
It's amazing the evolution of going from Emancipation Day all the way to Park Day, and now we're talking new beginnings, Silver Springs Reunion Club.
I want everyone to realize we're new beginning, we're new. We have revamped, we have started over. First order of business is we got our name change. We are now the Silver Springs Reunion Club because it originated in Silver Springs Park, and we wanted to get back to that, back to our roots. Everyone is a volunteer. We have ideas. We welcome ideas, good or bad, indifferent. We welcome everybody's ideas on how or what we can do to make it successful and to make each year better and better.
It was a lot of work, and for the group that in Springfield that's doing it now, I'm sure that they also have found that it really does take a lot to put on the weekend and a whole weekend of events, and that it takes a lot of care and love and concern.
In the very beginning, I was just the young person that would run errands for them. My mom and my aunts were my strong supporters that you can go ahead and join and you would love it. You're in it anyway, you're doing stuff with us anyway, you're volunteering, you're helping with picnics, you're helping with everything that whole weekend, so why don't you just join and be a part of it year round?
Silver Springs Park is the heart of the community. It's the first trailhead, the first marker for the African American Heritage Trail. It sits right there, Silver Springs Park, and it gives honor. I'm privileged to be able to work with our community and bring living history actors to the forefront. We're utilizing folks in higher education. We just got through doing Jonathan Fairbanks.
I have a good feeling about this place, you know. It's like I grew up here. I think that the more people understand what this place represents to black people, this park in particular, to me, Park Day should be a citywide event.
And you wouldn't be where you are today if it wasn't for them that came before you. So why not put their stories out here? I'm so glad I had Miss Lola in my life to tell me about Dr. Fairbanks, because I didn't know anything about him. She's the one that brought it to life about how he helped us, his importance to us.
This was the heart of the Black community, and the idea that we're able to come together, I believe it's a privilege, because so much has been done that gives us honor and gives us pride as a community.